howdy partners. Gather round the campfire, because OL Cactus Jack has a story for ya. This here's the tale of Dusty, a young cowboy with a imagination bigger than the Texas sky and a habit of hollerin' for help when there ain't no help needed. Now, Dusty's job was simple: keep a watchful eye on the town's prize-winning herd of fluffy sheep. He'd sit up on Dusty Bluff, which wasn't named after him, but he liked to pretend it was, and watch those woolly critters munch on the sweet prairie grass. But let me tell ya, watching sheep chew grass all day can get duller than a rusty spur. So, to spice things up, Dusty would get an idea. A mischievous, no good, very bad idea. He'd take a deep breath, puff out his chest, and yell at the top of his lungs. "Wolf, wolf, a big OL hairy wolf is after the sheep. Help!" Down in the town of Tumbleweed Gulch, folks would drop everything. Sheriff Sadie would leap from her desk, sending papers flying. Baker Bob would drop a tray of his famous prickly pear pies. Blacksmith Betty would drop her heavy hammer with a clang that echoed through the streets. They'd all grab their lassos, their brooms, whatever they could find, and race up Dusty Bluff, huffin' and puffin', ready to save the day. But when they got to the top, what would they find? Just Dusty, leaning against a rock, trying his best not to laugh. "False alarm, folks," he'd say with a cheeky grin. "Just a tumbleweed that looked a bit wolfish. My mistake." Sheriff Sadie would put her hands on her hips. "Dusty, this ain't funny. Crying wolf is serious business." Baker Bob would grumble about his squashed pies, and Blacksmith Betty would just shake her head and march back down the hill. Did Dusty listen? Well, for about a day. Then the boredom would creep back in. A few days later, he saw a coyote chasing a jackrabbit in the distance. It was nowhere near the sheep, but it was enough for Dusty Wolf. He howled. "It's a giant, hungry wolf with teeth like daggers. He's gonna eat Fluffy Bartholomew." Once again, the whole town scrambled up the hill. This time, they were even more out of breath and twice as annoyed Dusty. Sheriff Sadie warned, her voice stern, "One more time, and you'll be on mucking out duty for a month." Dusty promised he'd behave. He really truly meant it this time. He passed the time by practicing his lasso skills on cacti, which is a very prickly hobby, I might add. He counted the clouds and named them things like Fluffy, Bumpy, and Steve. He tried to teach a prairie dog to square dance. It was almost peaceful. Then, one quiet afternoon, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Dusty saw something move in the shadows of the canyon. It wasn't a tumbleweed. It wasn't a coyote. It was big. It was gray. It had pointy ears and glowing yellow eyes that were fixed right on the unsuspecting sheep. It was a real, live, honest-to-goodness wolf. Dusty's heart hammered in his chest. His mouth went dry. This was it, the real thing. He took the deepest breath of his entire life and screamed, "Wolf! Wolf! There's a real wolf! I'm not kidding. This time, he's here. Help! please." He yelled until he was hoarse. He jumped up and down, waving his arms like a windmill in a tornado. But down in Tumbleweed Gulch, nothing happened. Sheriff Sadie heard the cry, but she just sighed and went back to her paperwork. "That's just Dusty being Dusty," she muttered. "Baker." Bob was frosting a new batch of pies. "He won't fool me again," he chuckled. Blacksmith Betty was shoeing a horse, and she didn't even bother to look up. "That boy," she sighed, "needs a new hobby." No one came, not a single soul. Up on the bluff, Dusty was panicking. The wolf was creeping closer, licking its chops. The sheep were starting to bleat nervously, huddled together in fear. Dusty knew he couldn't fight a wolf on his own. He was just a kid. He had to do something. He looked around wildly. His eyes landed on his trusty lasso. Then he looked at the tall, pointy cactus he'd been practicing on. An idea sparked in his mind, a real idea, a brave idea, not a mischievous one. As the wolf lunged for the nearest sheep, Dusty swung his lasso with all his might. It sailed through the air and, with a bit of luck and a lot of practice, it looped perfectly around the top of the giant cactus. He pulled the rope tight, and with a mighty heave, he toppled the big prickly plant right into the wolf's path. The wolf yelped in surprise, getting a snoutful of spines. It stumbled back, shaking its head and whining. It had been expecting an easy meal, not a spiky surprise. While the wolf was distracted, Dusty ran towards the sheep, waving his hat and shouting, "Shugit, vamoose!" He herded the frightened sheep behind a big pile of rocks, keeping himself between them and the confused, spiky-nosed wolf. The wolf, deciding that these sheep were way too much trouble, tucked its tail between its legs and slunk back into the canyon, whimpering all the way. Dusty, breathing heavily, slid to the ground, his knees weak with relief. He had done it. He had saved the sheep all by himself, but he felt a pang of loneliness. It was a scary thing to face a wolf alone. Later that evening, when Dusty hadn't come down for supper, Sheriff Sadie started to worry. A real worry this time. "It's not like him to miss Baker Bob's stew," she said. She gathered Bob and Betty, and they cautiously made their way up Dusty Bluff, lanterns in hand. They found Dusty sitting with the sheep, his face pale and his hat clutched in his hands. They saw the giant toppled cactus and the clear wolf tracks in the dirt. Sheriff Sadie knelt beside him. "Dusty, there was a real wolf, wasn't there?" Dusty just nodded, his eyes wide. "I called and called," he whispered, his voice trembling, but nobody came. A heavy silence fell over the group. Baker Bob put a comforting hand on Dusty's shoulder. Blacksmith Betty looked at the wolf tracks and then back at the boy. "We're sorry, kid," she said, her voice softer than they'd ever heard it. "We should have believed you." From that day on, Dusty never cried wolf again. He had learned a hard lesson. If you always tell tall tales, no one will believe you when you finally tell the truth. And the folks of Tumbleweed Gulch learned a lesson too. They learned to listen a little closer, just in case. Dusty still watched the sheep, but now he had a new hobby, telling them true stories of his bravery. And you know what? They were the best listeners a cowboy could ask for. Thanks for listening to my story, partners. Remember to be true to your word. Now, be sure to hit that subscribe button and mosey on back here for more tales from the trail. See you next time.